Welcome, Dr. Hatch. I have followed your story for some time now. I feel very fortunate to have this opportunity to just have a conversation with you today.
Well, thank you. I hope you feel that way after.
I'm sure. As we sit here at the Chapel Hill office of Piedmont Health Services, we are grateful for your invaluable contributions as one of the leading founders for the first rural and urban community health center in the U.S. What sparked your interest in being part of the community health movement? And I'm thinking particularly about the journey you made from Boston, Massachusetts to Mississippi.
Well, I think that all people, especially in a rich nation like this, deserve a chance. There were many programs in the nation geared toward improving the chances of less fortunate Americans. I think it was the era of economic opportunity, the concept of bringing resources to communities that had been shortchanged in the process. I was interested in that and hoping that it would bear fruit, that good things would happen.
Just a few miles from here is the Gilling School of Public Health, where you earned your doctorate. What key factors shaped your view of health, not only as a health equity issue, but also an issue of social justice?
Well, I think health as a social justice issue had to do with the things I was seeing across America. I haven't been to a lot of places, but the first city I saw was, I guess, Louisville, Kentucky, and then Knoxville, Tennessee, and Atlanta was the first place that I really saw abundant middle-class housing for Black people. And I said, oh, it's possible. And I got to meet people in Atlanta who were not poor, that had drive and hopes of enabling many, many more people to live better, healthier lives. And some of them were on the faculty at the School of Social Work at Atlanta University. And then I found out that the Urban League had been involved maybe 30 years earlier in advocating for livable conditions in the urban environment that has perhaps declined as a result of migration of African American people from the Deep South. And there were several different periods of migration from the Deep South to the North, at first to the closest possible spots, and then longer distances, hoping for a better outcome, whether it did or not. And then where you had relatives, because family patterns tended to matter a lot. I was interested in the building blocks, if you will, of strong and viable African American communities, of a decent place to live, and of security. There was a lot of pent-up anger and violence in cities, as well as the countryside, but not a lot of resources aimed at reducing the rates of violence and neglect, family conflict based on not enough to live on many times, and intervening in ways that would bring life to a calmer and more fulfilling experience for African American people and others.
Engaging faith communities was a significant part of your work in public health, with much of that being with the General Baptist State Convention of North Carolina, one of the anchor institutions for the Hatch Lecture. Why was it important to engage with the faith community?
Well, in my lived experience, it was a faith community that was the model for almost everything. People turned to the church when they didn't have enough to eat. They turned to church in terms of sickness. My family's life had been built around the Black church. My dad was a preacher. Grandpa was the Grand Master of the Knights and Daughters of Cadentown. It was a benevolent organization that raised extra hogs and put them in the large hall so that if some people ran into crisis, the community was able to respond. And my mother traced her opportunity to go to college through the church and the Benevolent Association, because my grandfather had got to hear a man, an important Black man named Booker T. Washington, make a speech about the need to begin educating your children. And he said how important it would be to the future. So when Grandpa, on one of his long trips of, I guess about 100 miles from the Lexington area to the Louisville, Kentucky area, came back, he said, we got to educate Grace and Taylor, because the rest of them had already found work and possibilities. He said, because Mr. Washington said that it's time for Black people to begin to position themselves higher in the society in terms of decision making. And that's a factor in my mother's driving a horse and buggy from about 12 miles at age 15 or so to go to a mission school in the largest city in the area. So it was kind of like opening a door to a different world.
Well, just listening to you, I'm just thinking about how important exposure is. And leadership was certainly a defining characteristic in your family.
Yeah.
Growing up in a family of leaders, including a grandmother born in slavery,
Yeah.
no doubt all of that impacted your life.
No question, yeah.
Please share your most profound memory of your family's leadership legacy.
I guess by the time a couple of sisters, cousin, and maybe 5 or 6 grandchildren had made their way to college, my father had mortgaged his house 9 times to help. Never question, and in retrospect, after understanding what value a house meant to a family, the fact that he would put it on the line without discussing first, how are you going to pay me? I'm not sure I would have done that, but he did. And it made a lot of difference. And I also had a chance to observe what it was like when maybe there was a town of 3,000 people. And I guess maybe 10 college graduates in that town, and 2 of them were my parents. And I can remember my father building outhouses. He built a luxury outhouse, and then some of the neighbors wanted one too. Well, those are things that he had learned from the missionaries at the school that they both attended, Lincoln Institute in Kentucky. Started out as an offshoot of Berea College. Berea was one of those maverick places that accepted all races after the Civil War. And going back to family, a man I call Grandpa, but it was really a great-grandpa. He had lived slavery, my grandmother's father. And Grandpa heard what the missionaries said, your people need guidance and leadership, all those kinds of things. And then Grandpa somehow when freedom came, was literate. He could read the Bible. And he was called on a lot to go to funerals and weddings and just read the Bible is the way I hear it. And I kind of knew that people with literacy somehow got involved in the leadership around education, around housing development, and areas like that. So it didn't take a lot of imagination. It just sort of look at what your parents and grandparents are doing and look at what the cousins are doing. One of my other kind of jobs were when my grandmother could no longer walk every place she went, was to drive her in a car as a teenager. And she would ask to travel a distance of about 14 miles to visit Cousin Mary. And they would sit on the porch and discuss things that I should have listened to more carefully. But it was the pathway that they had followed from freedom and where they were now and what they hoped for, and how closely their hopes and dreams match some of the actions that they actually saw.
Just a powerful, powerful vision, just thinking about that economic impact and also the impact of education. You also mentioned the word freedom. And I'm just thinking that at the time of this recording, we are one day from Election Day, when we will cast our ballot for the highest political office in the nation, along with other major political offices throughout the country. Regardless of the election results, what words of caution and or hope can you share?
That there was a grand turnout, that I hope it's in all communities, but I would say most, being cautious, the Black people are expressing their interest in the outcome by voting. And places that were really under oppression in my lifetime, in South Carolina, North Carolina, Kentucky, people can go and vote, and a lot of them do it, and I hear they are, and it's a blessing. I sometimes wonder, and I guess I missed it on being really, really free in America, because, I've experienced early that, say, when we were living in Boston and going with 3 kids to visit parents in North Carolina, we would arrange the trip so that the last stop would be in Washington, D.C., where we knew we would get accommodations in a hotel. Because it was iffy once you left Washington, D.C. And another reality was, this is during the Eisenhower administration, Eisenhower made an appeal to some of the state governors and said, we're now in a struggle for the minds of people in this world. Some new nations are becoming a reality, like India and nations in Africa. Diplomats, African and East Indian, were being sometimes beaten in their journey from New York United Nations meeting to the Capitol in Washington, D.C. He said, we can't win the mind and hearts of people when you are taking their most respected, high-positioned folk in the bush and beating them. He said that.
I am just thinking about some of the weather events that we have experienced recently, hurricanes and the like. We are witnessing major shifts in climate and in the environment, and they tend to have a disparate impact on underserved and minority communities. How can the faith and health communities develop an agenda to address environmental justice in this country?
That's a tough one. I think the pathway is still cloudy. And then when people are sometimes overwhelmed by problems of daily survival, I'm not sure that they have the energy to be concerned about other things. In public health, you always have statistics. And one of the first lessons you learn is the higher death rates from African Americans, brown people, from a lot of common disorders, and the history of violence is profoundly sad as it disproportionately impacts young African American men in Durham this day. My hope is that we will find pathways away from some of these more negative, destructive experiences. And there's data, say, on white men in Virginia, near the University of Virginia, and then the next county is tobacco growers, dirt farmers, et cetera, et cetera. Life expectancy in the university town is 14 years longer than white men living in the adjoining county that have sort of bottomish jobs. That pattern would flow into areas of the South that are still struggling economically. And a lot of these diseases that in the nation's vision seem to plague Blacks can be defined by money as well as exposure to a germ. And as time goes forward, I hope that we can eliminate some of the real predictors of health among people, which is level of living, social status, and perhaps vision.
You still mentioned economics, and I just think about how that has been a hallmark of your career, making the connection between economics and health status. I'm curious as to whether you have any thoughts about how the faith and health communities could pool their efforts to address economic and political drivers of health.
Well, I think the basic values for living a good life are probably grounded in the African American church. You mentioned Shaw, St. Augustine, and North Carolina Central, if you went back, churches almost always have led the way to upward mobility, to education, to better housing, and so forth. And there's a lot more that could be done. I do think the Baptist Convention was visionary in its approach to involving lay people in taking on activities that impact health, like walking. Say, if you could get the preacher and his wife to walk. It just happened that way. They wonder, well, why are they dressed up on a Monday morning out on the street at 7:30 and they're not in the car? in a small town, people talk about that. And then the preacher tells them, well, they say if I walk like this, that maybe my diabetes will be under better control, et cetera, et cetera. And there were so many efforts we can talk about where whole communities got involved in fitness. The ACE, probably from my perspective, was I had a student that needed a major master's paper topic. And I said, find out whether there was any, or what the impact might have been from this program we put on with the help of Duke University, School of Medicine, and UNC School of Physical Therapy. And what we found was of 41 women involved, about 30 of them got higher paying jobs. And instead of being at the basic wage level, they were holding mid-level places, and they were working in nursing homes, in women's fitness centers, in health spas, and places like that. So there was social mobility for more than half of the women involved in the program that have mostly taken place in church basements, led by people from those churches, and strong support from preachers. Now, sort of a touchy spot was one preacher said to me, now look, John, we usually get the help and the white folks get the money. He said, now we know if UNC's getting a stack of money, then most of that money is going down to UNC. And if this thing goes, we want the money to come to the Baptist Convention. And with the time that Anita and I both put together, that amounted to a few $1 million, which in the scope of things, not much. Had impact. And when I wish I had the skill to discuss what it's like to get a table bigger than this one, with half of the circle coming from Duke University, UNC Chapel Hill, Central Shore, in the health field, and the other half preachers. And what it was you better be on your toes, because they have somewhat different agendas, but you're dealing with the leadership of the whole community. And change did happen.
I'm going to ask you a question now about some technology developments. And with the rapid and exciting advancements in artificial intelligence and related science and technology like precision medicine and genomics, what caution do we need to exercise as we think about some of these new technologies?
That so much of the health that we experience is based on personal decisions, the influence of the family and the community, and the degree to which we can reach the peddlers of medicine, peddlers of food, and hope that their ethical framework might extend beyond economic welfare or benefit. I think the most effective programming are programmings that enable people to help their families and their neighbors. And I've seen almost miracle transitions from an objection to shaking one's booty in the church basement in exercise to an understanding of the importance of daily living, of eating, of exercising, of social support, and changing behavior. And I think that might best happen when you receive this guidance from people that you know and trust. And those are, for many, many of us, fellow church persons. And it is the one institution that I would say that more Black people go to than any other in the community. It's declining to some degree, but it's still powerfully important.
And so despite those technological advances, nothing can really replace that social.
I think it can't replace it, but it's intriguing. And I enjoy discussions I have with my grandchildren, especially, who should know about these things.
What do you see as the future of public health?
As things get more subtle, I don't think we're going to have miracle cures. I think there will be machines and devices that enhance the ability of professionals to do their jobs. But we also have to make sure that the institutions who see themselves as responsible for health, and that would be your pharmacies, your fitness centers. And I think some of these places are in trouble because they are preoccupied with profit. But as these things come forward, it doesn't necessarily mean that the people in greatest need will understand it or come forward, unless there is caring, nurturing, and access. And I would say that we need to understand, where are these people? Where do they spend time? Who do they talk to? What do they hear? Will still be important questions. And I hope the new technologies will be put to full use rather than limited to those who have access and resources.
So thank you, Dr. Hatch. Your work is a blueprint for us all to follow as we seek to activate change in our pursuit of health justice. We just appreciate the path that you have paved for us and all of the lives that you have impacted through your work. And I just also want to thank you for continuing to share your amazing wisdom with us.
Thank you so much.